Geisinger's LifeFlight program turned 40 this year and has grown from one single-engine helicopter to 9 twin-engine helicopters.
So when you think about Abigail Geisinger and the reason she opened the hospital, interestingly, she was in the early 1900s the only citizen in Danville that had access to transportation. So when folks in the community or friends would become ill, she would offer to transport them either to Philadelphia or New York City. And so when you fast forward to 1981, really, I think it was the same vision of ensuring that people in rural Pennsylvania have the same access to high quality health care that folks in cities do. And that doesn't happen in all of rural America. So in 1981, really, as healthcare evolves and people could become more acutely ill and we're able to save them, I think what we recognized around NICU patients, trauma patients, that in order for those folks to have the same outcomes as people in cities, they needed hospitals that could supply those resources closer. Well, that's just not feasible. Right. So essentially what we did is we put an ICU in the back of a helicopter, and at the time it was a physician and a nurse team, and we took the hospital to them. And so while it seems a far stretch from Abigail's original vision to 1981, I like to think that they're really similar visions, and Abigail would be really proud.
Richard Smith, who has gone from being a LifeFlight pilot to now director of LifeFlight operations, came to the program with a military background.
It was something I did for a living, as far as I did it 21 years in the military.
Right.
I flew Blackhawks in the military, so I was pretty comfortable flying helicopters, if you only could imagine.
Right.
Smith found it to be a different environment than what he was used to.
Honestly, I found it to be more challenging flying when I'm doing that, was doing patients. Yeah, because in the military, you're a number, so to speak. If you had to fly casualties on the field, which I did. I flew EMS in the Army twice, 2 different times, once in Korea and once in Germany. And there's a sense of you want to save people's lives. But when you all of a sudden take it in the civilian world, especially picking up little children and things, it shouldn't affect you. You try it, but it does. If you're a father, I have 4 boys, and it bothers you. And so there's more pressure on. I felt more pressure on me flying EMS or presently, the position, than flying in the military.
Lots of times LifeFlight goes, it's the worst day of their family life, the life of that family or that patient. We look at every patient we transport, it's somebody's family member. It could be mine. We live in small communities that everybody knows everybody.
Right.
And most times if you go out into the community, somebody's telling a story about being life-flighted or a family member being life-flighted, being here for as long as we have been.
Registered nurse Jerry Splitt has been with the program for 33 years in different roles and is now the LifeFlight program director.
But the skill set is, we need to be prepared to have our teams on their A game from A to Z. I could be out there tomorrow taking care of a 500-gram neonate with our neonatal partners from Jan and Weiss Children's, all the way to someone over 100 years old with COVID or some other disease process. You go between those 2 spectrums, you just think about what can happen in between. Right. And we got to have our teams trained to be on their A game from all age groups, all types of medical conditions, trauma conditions.
Jeff GAZEY, Director of Aviation Maintenance, talks about the program's rigorous maintenance protocols.
This is where we do the heavy inspections. This is an 800 flight hour 3-year inspection. So it's a dual interval, whatever we hit first, whether it's calendar
it's
time.
Either
800 flight hours or 3 years.
Yeah. And what kind of inspections does this go through?
This is basically nose to tail inspection complete. Now along with it, there's supplementary inspections, like the engine modules get retired at a certain flight hour. So we're doing engine module changes. We have that engine completely torn apart. There's a mast in the main gearbox that has to come out at 1600 flight hours. So There's roughly, on this model aircraft, there's roughly 1,500 tasks that we do on different intervals that constantly recycle all the time. We're actually considering, right now we do 2 full shifts. We're discussing going to a potential 3rd shift as well. Yeah. We've been so busy and our flight volume has increased so much, we're having a hard time keeping up with the flow. We average about 4 man-hours per flight hour to maintain the aircraft. So for every flight hour, we're putting 4 hours of work into the aircraft. So we've actually outsourced recently 2 inspections to a company out west just because we've been struggling to keep up with the schedule.
Our normal monthly volumes have been in the 300s most of this year. In 2 months, we were over 400 transports for the month.
Wow.
Those are numbers.
That's significant.
That is significant. The first time we hit 400 was in January. The records that stood before that stood back to 2007, 2008, and that was 325.
Wow.
And through the fall of last year and in January, we started breaking that record. That stood for a long time, and it's been consistently. The op tempo is significantly increased with our activity than it had been before COVID. Yeah, well, where we are right now is, we need to continue to build our infrastructure to support the frontline folks and the frontline operations.
Mm-hmm.
And some of the levers that were mentioned, Jeff's group with maintenance, we got to continue to build the infrastructure to support the front line. And we also need pilots, we need mechanics. We're looking at opportunities to expand our critical care program, ground program, to 24/7 up in the Wilkes-Barre-Scranton market. Just the data is demonstrating we need to have 2 teams in that market. That's one of our more populated markets, the Wilkes-Barre-Scranton. Currently, we have 1 helicopter and 1 life flight ground vehicle up there. And we're creative with our staffing. During the day, there's 2 teams, and at night, there's 1 clinical team. But the data is demonstrating we need to move that team and expand that team to 2 teams 24/7.
Okay.
And then how the hospital really backs us with good equipment. That's a shortfall at a lot of places. They put them in a single engine. It's not, a seasoned guy like me would never work there at the places that. But here you got 2 engines, you got the good equipment, the bases. If you go around and look at the bases, I mean, it's premium. So that's really, as far as the 40-year deal goes, that's what I'd focus on, is how it was back in 1981 and how it is today and how it grew and growing.
One of the recent additions we added to our program that has saved lots of lives so far is our blood program. And we partnered with the Geisinger blood program, and every transport asset carries 2 units of packed red blood cells right now.
Wow.
And we're going to be transitioning that to a unit of whole blood because it gives you the total product versus just the packed red blood cells.
So even better.
Yes. We're data driven and looking at always opportunities to improve our care, improve the outcomes, improve the quality of life of the patients that we are asked to transport.